Good morning tarot fans, beautiful people. This is Sadhana from rainy British Columbia, Canada. It's Saturday morning, and I thought this morning I would do a long postponed video response to Katie Bear. During the 24-hour Tarot-thon, I really enjoyed her piece where she compared the Osho Zen Tarot to the Rider-Waite deck. And this morning I'm going to do something similar, and I'm going to look at the cards that Katie Bear did not look at, offer some of my own interpretations, and hopefully we can have a discussion in the comments about some of the the other cards that are more challenging to work with. Some of them are very similar to Rider-Waite. Some of them are off in their own kind of realm. The cards were drawn by Deva Padma, who was living in residence with Osho when he was still alive. This is the book that comes with the cards, and it is a really thorough supplement to the deck. You'll find it if you are struggling with reading. If you've had the cards for a long time and you're struggling with reading them, I really encourage you to go back to have a look at the reference book, because it's full of insight and information that might clear things up a lot. So this was published alongside the deck in 1995, and then in 2003 the Osho Center published this book, and this book contains different information, additional information for each of the cards. So you're not going to get the information replicated, you're going to get something new for each of the cards to give you more insight into the deck and the teachings behind the cards. The editor is the same for the first book and the second book. And I'm going to compare the cards this morning to Robin Wood's deck. So if you're not familiar with Robin Wood's deck, it is very much based on the Rider-Waite system, but it has more of a Wiccan twist to it. And I was just having a look at Robin's book this morning, which I haven't picked up in ages. And if you don't have this book, I really recommend getting this book. She does an amazing job of describing not only her cards, but the tarot in general. She's got a great history, and it's fascinating to read her own history of the development of her deck, which interestingly enough began in Okinawa. And I laugh because I have had so many things recently take me back to my days in Japan. When I was in my 20s, I lived in Japan for 3 years. I was teaching English as a second language after I graduated from university. There were no teaching jobs in British Columbia at that time, so I chose to go to Japan, and I ended up staying for 3 years, and then I went back many times after that, taking groups of students and various things. But recently, a lot of things have come back, and that my connections with Reiki, there are a few things that arose. I realized that I've actually been to Mount Kurama, and this is one of the first places in Kyoto that I actually really connected with the temples and so forth. So I'm going to flip the camera and we'll go through the cards, and probably won't go through all of them in one video, but if we do, we do. Otherwise I'll make 2 videos. Because I want to go through the ones that Kelly Bear didn't cover, and that was a lot. So she went through, if you haven't seen her video, please have a look at her video. She went through 3 cards from each suit, and then she went through 6 of the majors. So quite a few cards, but there's still lots to go through. So we'll take this as far as we can today. Okay, so here we go. So the purpose of this exercise is to see the Rider-Waite similarities in the Osho Zen Tarot. And some of the cards, that is going to be easier than others. And the cards that I'm not showing are cards that have already been discussed in the 24-hour Tarot-thon with Kelly Bear. So I'm starting with number 1, the Magician here. And let's just talk about the number 1. So the number 1 is a beginning. It is a potential, right? It is the next card after the Fool. It's the start of the journey. In both of these cards, we're looking at unlimited potential. And if you look at the lemon skate above the hand of the Magician, if you look at all of the tools on his table, all of the elements, all of the symbols are represented here. Anything is possible. Okay, so look at the woman on the leaf looking out into the universe. Right here, anything is possible. So when anything is possible, we have unlimited potential, we have unlimited power. And I really don't think that's, going too far. I think there definitely is a similarity here. Slightly different angle, slightly more Zen, more of a spiritual take on the whole thing. You can look at the Magician more from a materialistic perspective, making sure that you have all the tools in your toolbox and that magic is created from real things. But yeah, I really like kind of looking at these two as unlimited potential, and it is available to anyone if you're willing to go there and you're willing to see it, right, with eyes wide open. So then we have the Empress and creativity. And I just before I go on, I think I am going to trim my deck. I really liked to look at Kelly Bear's deck without the keywords on it. It's very, very helpful. This card is very simple. Okay, so to see the Rider-Waite in the Empress card, the fertility, just the symbols of fertility are the same in both cards. And just realizing that fertility comes from the universe. It comes from, right? We've just come from the Magician card. So from that unlimited potential, anything can be birthed, anything can be born. Children can be born, projects, gardens, all kinds of things. So this is not a difficult card to see the similarity. And then we have the Emperor card. And I really like the Emperor card in the Osho Zen Tarot because it shows an element of risk, an element of kind of breaking free of societal constraints and having the balls to move forward and take the bull by the reins, take charge, and get on with business. I don't really see the father figure in the Osho Zen Tarot. I look at it more as it's a very active card as opposed to the Emperor card, which is super passive, and you see the Emperor, sitting on his throne. This is a favorite card of mine in the Osho Zen. But you can see the similarities there in the masculine energy. So number 5 is called Nothingness. It is just a black blank card. And what comes to mind for me is the word guru. The word guru in Sanskrit means remover of darkness. And when we look to teachers who are in this world, the reason we have teachers is because we need guides. We need someone to take away our ignorance, someone to help in this process, someone who has been through what we are going through, and someone who can, lead us in the right direction and maybe even, help us speed things up along the path. So the idea of the blank black screen is that, the canvas is empty and we are open and we are ready for something to appear. So we're not expecting anything to appear. We're just kind of receiving the information. If you look at the Hierophant card in a couple of other decks, teachers come in lots of different forms, not just popes. there's the Hierophant from the Everyday Witch Tarot as a yoga instructor, as a meditation teacher. Here's the Hierophant as a mother or an older sister. Here is the Hierophant as just as a reflective woman. This is the number 5 card from the manga tarot. And, you know, this is actually very similar, right? Look with closed eyes, looking beyond this world for what needs to be taught. So if we kind of go back and say, how is this like Rider-Waite? It's like Rider-Waite because it is modeling the concept of teacher, of guru, and, you know, it is helping us to clear space so that we can receive the information. Okay, something like that. This is, you know, some of these cards are a heck of a lot easier than others, but those are a few of my thoughts. Okay, so the Lover's card, that's pretty straightforward. Easy to see the Rider-Waite in that one. Okay, and then we have the Chariot. So here's another one that is a little different. So how can we see the concept of moving forward, moving through, moving beyond? As you're aware, a lot of the Chariot cards do not have reins. A lot of the Chariots don't have reins. So the idea with the Chariot is that in order to move forward, we need to come into a place of trust, into a place of balance, into a place, you know, of where everything kind of, you know, we've moved through a lot. We've got the yin and the yang represented with the black and the white horses. The yin and yang symbol is here in the center. He's got the harp, the harmonious music. He's pretty active. I mean, this isn't definitely a moving forward card. We have, in this particular deck, a young man is represented, and he looks like he's ready to fly. In the Osho Zen card, we have a figure that is breaking through a veil of ignorance. In Sanskrit, it's called Maya. And kind of, you know, seeing through the facade of life. And so I really do see the similarity here. And the moving forward here is moving, again, not unlike, it's actually, it makes a lot of sense if you look at this in sequence with the Hierophant. So if you look at the 5 and the 7 in this deck, once you kind of receive the information in the 5 card, then you're able to break through the ignorance, break through the veil, and move forward. So number 9 is the Hermit. The cards are very similar. Should be easy to see the Rider-Waite connection here, so we don't need to prolong that one. And then we have the Wheel of Fortune. And the Wheel of Fortune is, you know, in a lot of different decks, it's really hard to see the challenges of this card. It's not clearly illustrated, I don't think, in either of these decks. The guidebook is excellent for the Osho's. Both of the Osho Zen guidebooks are excellent for this card called Change. You know, if you look at a deck like the Anna K Tarot, for example, this is, you know, much more clearly illustrated that, you know, for a very brief period of time, we are high, we are joyful, we're on the top of the wheel, and then, you know, somebody gives it a little shove and there we are down in the bottom again. So really this card is about learning to be in balance. You see how this one has the yin and yang symbol in the middle? So learning how to stay closer to the center of the wheel, so we're not hanging on to the outside and the changes aren't so hard to process, right? We want to learn to live life a little more, less tousled about, shall we say. So similarities there for sure. Justice is another card, difficult card for me to see the similarities. Bringing balance. This is also a card about karma. So the number 11 card. Karma. So how does this image, how does this key word relate to karma? And it is, you know, if you just stop and think about how you feel when you kind of realize what it is that you need to do to make something happen, or finally everything kind of falls into place and then you are able to step through and break free. So this card is just a little more active than this card. So look at the 7 and the 11. This is kind of the dawning, the realization that I'm able to move forward and step through, and this card is just like plowing through fire. Okay, let's move on with this. And, you know, quite literally breaking through the brick wall. Because why? Because things came into balance. There may have been some karma that was rectified and, you know, that enabled you to move forward. So it is possible to draw, even in some of these more challenging cards, it is possible to see a Rider-Waite teaching in the Osho Zen. But like I said, some of them, it is a little bit of a stretch and a little bit more esoteric. Death card, I think that's self-explanatory. It's called Transformation and several other decks as well. And the Temperance card, very easy to see the similarities here. All right, it's called Integration, which I think is a beautiful word for the Temperance card in this deck. Look at the colors. It's just beautiful. Bringing all the teachings together, finding harmony, finding balance. Okay, Tower, very similar. The only difference here is that the Tower is within. So the fire is burning within the physical body, within the chakra system, and the explosion happens within the mind. It is not something that is external. But I think I really like this illustration of the Tower. Kind of gets you thinking, you know, more like a sword suit, and that these things that happen in our life really are part of our consciousness rather than our physical experience. And then we get to the Moon card, which is a little strange, but I'm going to do my best to try and make the connection here. And there's a couple of things here. One is that this is a card to have us reflect on all that we have learned in the lives that come before this life. So everything that we have been through is accumulative, whether it's in patterns that we're repeating or different kinds of experiences that we've had. They all contribute to who we are now. The Moon card is about looking into the dark places, looking to the places where, into the things that we don't necessarily want to look at, the dark corners of our self, our shadow side. So when we're looking to our shadow, we're often looking at patterns that we are repeating over and over, things we've shoved underneath the carpet. So it's not such a stretch to say that this is a very similar meaning. Okay, so the Past Lives card is about our shadow past, as well as the great things, the good karma that we have built. But when we step into each new incarnation, it's the hard stuff that we are trying to process and get through, not the good stuff. So, you know, really similar card, right? Moon is looking at our shadow side, and this just happens to call it past lives. So I think that works really well. And then we come to the Sun, and this is really beautiful. I like that the Osho Zen card chose the old man looking at the cricket. Calling this card innocence is absolutely perfect, right? Having a childlike, there's a Sanskrit word called lila, learning to live in a sense of divine play, learning to be playful and have a childlike heart, embracing joy like a child, right? So the other aspect is that we're coming near the end of the cycle, right? So there's an old man represented here. The old man has been through a lot, and he is able to still feel like the fool, to feel older and wiser, but still be able to embrace the joy of gazing at the cricket like a little kid, right? I quite relate to that. And then the Judgment card is called Beyond Illusion. And look how the third eye is opening up here. And you can see that the clarity, the insight is coming from within, not from without. And I would like to pull up the Judgment card from Journey Through the Hidden Realm. Okay. Look at this Judgment card here. Isn't that just one of the most beautiful Judgment cards you've seen? And does it kind of remind you of the Sun card here? So I think when we start to look at the major arcana as a continuous sequence, a continuous story, it's important to be aware of what cards come before and come after the current card that you're looking at, because this is, although we don't always live our life in sequence and we don't always go through these archetypes in sequence, these are all part of a journey. And just having that awareness can really kind of help to bring insight into looking at the cards. This is a time when we recognize everything that is come before. And here you see her rising, the phoenix is behind her. She's rising out of the fire, rising out of the ash in front of the phoenix, birthing a new life. When Kundalini rises, when we become enlightened, when we can see clearly beyond illusion, you know, this is just perfect. So yeah, I totally see the Rider-Waite in this one. Okay, so now we come to the suit of swords, called the suit of clouds in the Osho Zen, which represents the mind. And keep in mind that in the Osho Zen Tarot, the ace follows the 10. In the guidebook, the court cards are described in one section, and then you get the descriptions 2 through 10, and then the ace. So the ace is seen as the culmination of the suit. So let's look at this kind of cyclically, as if the ace can begin or end any of the suits. In the suit of clouds, the cards are quite cartoon-like, and this is the only one that is more this looks like an actual statue. And if you look at the statue of Buddha here, it's kind of gone beyond. It's in the clouds, it's in the sky, it's the full expansiveness of consciousness represented here. So when the mind is in its purest form, it is one with consciousness. The Ace of Swords is, yes, about new beginnings, but it is about kind of breaking through, much like the Maya card, much like the Chariot in the Osho Zen. At least that's how I see it. Let me go back and find it so you can look at it side by side. So for me, the Ace of Swords is much like this card, okay, which is called awareness. It's about breaking through all of the crap and finally seeing the light, knowing what direction to take, and kind of charging forward. So the swords is about communication. It's about anything to do with the mind. and mind being connected to consciousness, being connected to heart consciousness, consciousness in general, not just what we think of as the brain. And so there is a spiritual aspect to this as well too. As with all of the aces, there is, you know, that spiritual component. So I think this is a really nice, a nice set of cards to compare here, because the Osho Zen helps you expand your awareness of the Rider-Waite system. And I think for the most part that it does that throughout the deck. It just gives you a kind of another layer, another flavor to the Rider-Waite traditional messages. So here we have number 2, which is called schizophrenia. Kind of, you know, here you are between a rock and a hard place. Do you pull up your strength? Do you pull up your core strength and somehow get over to the other side? Or you just hang there forever, lose strength in your ankles and your wrists and fall down into the chasm? You know, it's your choice, and you need to take off the blindfold and have a look which way you're going. If the blindfold is going to stay on, that's fine. You're looking inward and you're going to resolve the problem by looking inward. It works either way, but you need to make the decision and you need to move forward. It's going to take some inner strength. Both of these cards, you can see that they're in darkness. There's a moon component. There's definitely, you know, you can see the distress in both cards. So this decision, you know, might be quite a serious one, but it is time definitely to act and carry on, or you are going to either get swallowed up by the water or you're going to fall down into the chasm between the two precipices. The Three of Swords, very kind of easy to see the similarities here. Heartbreak, it's called isolation. The kind of idea that we need to make sure that grief is fully processed to move through it. It needs to be acknowledged. But if you stay in grief and you don't continue to move the energy, you will become frozen and very much alone. So recognize the pain, live the pain, experience the pain, and then do what you need to do to, you know, to move through it. And I think that is an equal message, an equally wise message for the Rider-Waite as well too. Now here we've got something a little bit different. It's called postponement. You can see the outside edge of the card is in black and white, and then we've got color in the center here, kind of reminiscent of the suit of Earth, which is called rainbows in this deck. This is a card of rest. It's a card of reflection. If you look at, like I was saying, looking at the cards in sequences, I think is really important. So you've gone through some grief, you've gone through something very, very painful, and so there is time needed to heal. This card makes perfect sense. So does this card make perfect sense following this card? So does the postponement card make sense following the isolation card? To me, not really. I don't get the sequence here in the Osho Zen, but postponement we tend to think of as a bad word. And postponement may be necessary. You know, if you think of Ganesh, if you think of when obstacles are put on our way for a certain reason, things are, accidents happen, weather changes, plans are canceled, Mercury goes retrograde. Sometimes this happens for a reason, a very, very good reason. And as long as you're not going to lose sight that this rest, this time of, this period of, call it postponement if you want, is necessary for healing, then, you know, at some point you are going to have to get up and go on. Otherwise, you know, you're going to be in kind of like a Five of Cups situation. Here we have the Five of Swords. And I like to call this card the Nana Nana Boo Boo card. I don't know if you ever said that to somebody when you were playing a game as a kid, but I just think this face is just so nasty. I think it's in the Deviant Tarot as well too. You'll see that the figure in the foreground has his tongue stuck out, looking back to the people that were defeated in the background. It's called comparison in the Osho Zen, and there is great danger in comparison because we need to remember that these people in the background that were defeated, there was some lesson to be learned here, and I have a feeling that this guy in the foreground has not learned the lesson. Our greatest enemies are the people that irritate us the most, the emotions that, what's the expression? Are the hairs raise up on our body, and the people that make us feel really ill at ease. There is something about that within our own psyche that we have to reconcile. And so just taking on this kind of childish behavior is very, very dangerous. Looking at it with the keyword comparison, the oak is as strong as the bamboo is as strong as the oak, and they both serve their own purpose. They both have a great purpose in the world, on the planet, and there's no reason to compare one with the other. They're both magnificent trees. They're both magnificent beings, just as these are all magnificent beings here. And oh my goodness, I did a reading today and a similar card came up. The comparison card in the Connected and Free, the Alchemist's Oracle, came up in a reading today. And the message that I got from this card was that, isn't that a beautiful comparison card? The message that I got was, when you look up to the sky and you say, oh my God, that's so beautiful, or you look at something and you comment on a physical characteristic, or you say something to somebody quite, here's an example, somebody jumped out of their car in a parking lot and was screaming at me the other day and telling me what a terrible driver I was. The world is a mirror. The world reflects back what is going on the inside for you. And so when you get all riled up, when you get into a situation where a battle ensues, where there is an argument, where something is going on, this is a mirror situation happening. And there is some learning that needs to happen, and it hasn't happened in this particular picture here. So there is, I don't know, I just think this is a beautiful teaching. I don't want to belabor the point, but maybe look at your other 5 of Swords cards in your other decks and see if you can find the teaching of comparison in those decks. Then we have the Moving On card, which makes sense to me. We've got here this man who is carrying this load. So instead of carrying swords, he's got a woman and a crow and I don't know, a whole bunch of stuff on his back. And I think that after the exhaustion, after the lesson of the 5 of Swords, it's probably not a bad idea to start throwing some of these swords out of the boat. You don't need to take them all with you, just as this guy is not. Doesn't need to carry all this with him to get up. He's never going to get over the mountain if he doesn't relieve himself of some of this stuff. And I think there's probably a few things in the boat that could be thrown over the side as well too. So in order to, find the greener grass over here on the other side of the water, there's some things that are going to need to be left behind. So I think that's kind of cool. Gives you more insight into that card. Then come to the 8 of Swords, called Guilt in the Osho Zen. And these thoughts that plague our mind, the mental monkey chatter, this is a card to remind us to get out of our headspace, back into our heart, back into more of a Zen place. I think one of the very best 8 of Swords cards is from the Anna Tarot. This one here, if you haven't seen it, it's just perfect, right? You've got this beautiful maiden princess here, and look at what she sees in the mirror. Doesn't this kind of remind you of, you know, if you have friends who have anorexia or something like that, people who don't really see, they don't see clearly who they are or what their reality is. And so this is, again, a brilliant way to look at the Swords cards from a truly mental perspective. And then we have 10 of Swords. Keyword rebirth. End of the cycle. And after all that you have been through, it definitely is an opportunity to get up and move on. Things are definitely not going to get worse. So, you know, usually the Osho Zen Tarot takes a more shadow perspective, but I think in this card you've got a much lighter card in the Osho Zen. And then we come to the court cards, and I find of all the suits, these courts in the Osho Zen are the most challenging. We're looking here about intellectual pursuits, moving forward. And this is a beautiful card of action, you know, cutting through any doubt. There's a lot of clarity here. This is a card of action, and, you know, whether it's going off to university or maybe starting to write a chapter, the first chapter of a book, whatever it is, there is definitely some youthful exuberance here, and there is some intellectual pursuit, and there is unlimited potential for knowledge. And I think, you know, the danger here, the shadow side of this, is that a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. We always need to remember that. But also, knowledge is not wisdom. So we need to be careful what we fill our mind with. And just this is a kind of a totally scary image here. So that is all I really want to say. Be careful what you fill your mind with. And then we have our champion here. There is no stopping the Knight of Swords. He is moving swiftly, sometimes irrationally, sometimes without thinking. And I do not get the same sense of action with the Osho Zen Knight of Air, the Knight of Swords. This is full, you know, this is behind full armor. There is no movement. Look at his fists, how they're clenching here. There are kind of spirits, souls in the background here holding onto each other and arguing. There's a lot of resistance here. So it's quite a different side of moving forward. So you need to ask, what is it that you are fighting? What is the motivation behind charging ahead like this? Are you running away from something? Are you avoiding something? You know, the shadow side is that there is something deep down that you are struggling with that needs to be faced. So he may very well need to turn around and go back to deal with what he needs to deal with. Let's look at communication. Let's look at words. Let's look at, I mean, in the Osho Zen, it's about the mind and it's about the mental chatter. And this is kind of, you know, if you don't resolve what's going on in this card, then you're going to end up, you know, locked up in armor like this. So this is definitely the least rider weight of the court cards. The Queen, oh my God, she really bugs me. I do not like this card. This is a beautiful Queen of Swords. Look at the butterflies on her cape. You know, she has the wisdom, she has the knowledge. And here, everything is all kind of locked up in this Queen of Air, Queen of Swords, because she is so darn worried what everybody thinks about her, instead of being unique and using all of the wisdom that she has gained for the right reasons. Instead, she's turning into an old prune. So I think, you know, this is the darkest possible side of this card. This card often comes up for divorced women. And, you know, this is what you want to look like after your divorce. You want to be free. You want to be, you know, wielding your sword and jumping forward. You don't want to be drying up like an old prune because of what people say or what you think people might say, or, you know, it really is the shadowy, scariest side of the Queen of Swords. And Kelly Bear did look at this card, but I put it back in just to kind of show you the culmination of the suit. So Robin Wood has drawn these cards, these, you know, beautiful light colors. There's always birds. The clouds are light. They're not dark. The court cards seem to have, you know, mastered the suit and are able to move forward, whereas in the Osho Zen, there's definitely, you know, still quite a bit of work to do to gain the freedom that, you know, we want to find from the Ace. So going back to the Ace, where are you? So if I look at these two kings here, right, the Robin Wood king, you know, is definitely closer to making progress than this king here. And the king and the queen in the Osho Zen are very similar. They are just clinging so tightly to what society expects of them. They're clinging just way too tightly to their book learning, right? So let's look at book learning versus wisdom. And there seems to be very little wisdom in either of these cards. And you can see, you know, peaks of wisdom definitely in the Rider-Waite. So yeah, these court cards are a little tricky to work with.